Hello everyone, myself Hermes Sani, Registered Migration Agency ECA. Welcome back this season first live webinar on skill assessment and PR pathways in Australia. In this webinar, I'm going to discuss the importance of skill assessment, various skill assessing authorities, their requirements, eligibilities, and assessment criteria. There are about 37 to 40 skill assessing authorities in Australia for about more than 400 of occupations. There are so many skill assessment authorities, so I can't cover details of each and every skill assessing authorities because of the time constraint. But I'm going to discuss the most common skill assessing authorities we face most of the time in most common occupations in this seminar. So let's begin with what about the skill assessment is. So the most common question client asks from us, what is the skill assessment and why skill assessment matters? So skill assessment is basically an independent evaluation of your skills, qualifications, and work experience. It confirms the eligibility for your nominated occupation in Australia. So it is a mandatory assessment for all general skill migration visas, for example, subclass 189, subclass 190, subclass 491, and for the employer-sponsored visas like 186, 494, and even some occupation for subclass 482 visa as well. So when skill assessment is, you got the positive outcome of your result, only then you are eligible to apply expression of interest or visas for which the assessment is mandatory. But if skill assessment is negative, then still there is a hope. You can resubmit the application with updated evidences, or you can appeal for the decision of your outcome. Most of the assessing authority charges extra to go for the appeal. And there are some alternative pathways as well I will going to discuss later in this webinar. So generally, skill assessment is a legal requirement and it is mandatory for our general skill migration category visas under migration regulations. So these visa subclasses are, as I discussed, the employer-sponsored visas and general skill migration visas. So it confirms your skills and experience that meets the Australian standards and needed to claim points for qualification and work experience, because sometimes you have to assess your work experience as well to claim the points for your relevant work experience through skill assessment. And for employers, employer trust skill assessment when sponsoring workers. And this skill assessment of a link with your registration and licensing for particular occupations, for example, for nurses, when NMAC doing the skill assessment, and Engineers Australia and other trade occupations as well, for example, electrician and plumbers. And most important thing is these skill assessment are time sensitive, so it's better to apply as soon as possible whenever you're going to lodge expression of interest for skill visas or any other employer sponsored visas. The skill assessment validity is about 3 years for general skill migration, but some sort of skill assessment like NMAC, ACS, the validity period is of 2 years. So better to apply on time whenever you got eligible, and same type, if it got refused again, it pushed back all your entire migration timeline. So it is quite important to understand these things as well. Next question arises, who need the skill assessment? So today speaking, it is a mandatory criteria under migration regulations, and is mandatory for all general skill migration visas like subclass 189 skill independent visas, skill nominated visas subclass 190, and still work regional provisional visa 491, and also mandatory for some employer sponsored visas like 186 employer nomination scheme visa and direct entry, and subclass 494, which is also employer sponsored regional provisional visa. And in some cases of subclass 482, which is a skill in demand visa, previously it was known as temporary skill shortage visas. Uh, so it is a mandatory requirement to process all these visa subclasses. So most PR streams rely on this first approval of the skill assessment. So whenever you have the positive outcome, only then you'll be eligible to apply for these visa subclasses. Now, as I said, there are so many assessing authorities, about 35 to 40 skill assessment authorities in Australia for the different occupation, depends upon your occupation, your work responsibilities, and your qualification. So, giving you the most common examples of skill assessing authority is Australian Computer Society. It is normally assess ICT professionals, for example, software engineer, analytics programmer, software developer, cyber security expert, ICT business specialist. So all these occupations are assessed by the Australian Computer Society, which is called ACS. Another important assessing authority is ANMEC, which is Australian Nursing and Midwifery Accreditation Council. So it sorry. So it assesses most of the health professional occupations, for example, nurses, midwifery, for migrant and professional practitioners in the health sector. CPA, IPA, which is commonly assessed the accountants, external auditors, tax accountants, law accountants. So all these categories are assessed by these assessing authorities. IML, which is Institute of Managers and Leader. So these assessing authorities assess senior management consultants, for example, HR managers, sales, marketing managers, journal managers of the company. So all these high level occupations are assessed by Institute of Managers and Leaders. TRA, very important assessing authority. So those who qualified and experienced in a trade profession, for example, electrician, plumber, chef, carpenter, painters, mechanics, and all other trade workers, they all assessed by the Trade Recognition Australia, which is TRA. VETASS, vocational education and training sector. So very vast number of occupations are assessed by the VETASS assessing authority. It covers over 300 occupations, including business, education, social work, science and hospitalities, and even trade as well, and a lot more other occupations are assessed by the VETASS. So all these assessing authorities, they have their own requirements, on criteria, and they assess as per their own norm, because all of these assessing authorities are independent bodies. So, but the basic concept of all assessing authority is the criteria adopted by each assessing authority is almost the same. So it divided into, to explain you, we divide into steps. So step one, first of all, for each assessing authority, whenever you're going to assess your skill, so step one is check your occupation and ANZESCO code. So first step is locate your occupation. What is your occupation on skill occupation list? Then confirm its ANZESCO code, the official classification that defines task, responsibility, and skill level in Australia. Your work reference must match the task described in ANZESCO. Generally, the fake or generic references often rejected. So your work references, job duties must match with the ANZESCO. So it is not a thing like you just copy paste from the ANZESCO list all those job responsibility in your reference letter. It's must match with those responsibilities, but it depends upon occupation to occupation, and your work location, what sort of job duties you are performing. So always create your own job responsibilities which are most relevant to you, and they should match with the ANSCO list. So that is very important. Now, after uh, confirming the ANSCO code and your occupation, the next step, step 2, is review assessment criteria. So under this criteria, first of all, check your education. It must be relevant and equivalent to the Australian standard and ANSCO code of that particular occupation. Work experience, again I said, it must reflect ANSCO duties and skill level. English proficiency, so most skill assessing authority accept IELTS, PTs, and other tests as well. Uh, and it is not mandatory for all assessing authorities. So different assessing authority have their own requirements. Some assessing authority needs your English test before applying to the skill assessment, some not. For example, there is no need to, if you're going to vet assess to assess your skill, there is no need for the English requirement for the assessment. But some assessing authorities like NMAC, if you going for the nursing assessment, or Engineer Australia, if you are engineers, engineering technologists, engineering managers, then you must have competent English before submitting the application for skill assessment. Similarly, for ACS, there is no requirement for the English test. But if you're going for the accountants, going to IPA, CPA, then again, you need at least 7 each or equivalent English requirement. So it is depends upon assessing authority to assessing authority. And all assessing authority have deemed structure, references, templates, statutory declaration, and additional exams before applying for the skill assessment. So each assessing authority have their own requirements. So you have to go through it first before applying for the skill assessment, or you can take help from the digital migration agents as well, because it is very mandatory steps, and definitely you seek advice if you are not experienced in it. Then come to the next third step is prepare your documents. Now, it is very important. So all your documents must be clear color scans under the DPI setting defined by the assessing authorities. Some assessing authority has, like ACS, they have it requirements that your documents must be scanned under 300 DPI setting, and VETASS says it has to be under 150 DPI setting. So all assessing authority have their own criteria. So you have to match those criteria when scanning and submitting your documents. Employment reference letters, they must be detailed, signed, dated, and must be on the company letterhead. Another supporting documents, if you're going to assess the skill employment experience as well, then you need to have ready with your pay slips, tax documents, employment contract, and job description, employment reference letter, which contain the job description and exact start and end date of your occupation, of your profession. And detailed and structured CV which meet the Australian standards, means on your CV, your qualification, your work experience, your job responsibilities, your address, your contact details, everything has to be there on your resume. If your documents are in other language, for example, you're applying from overseas and your documents are not in English, then they have to be certified. If you are in Australia, you can certify it from the NATI certified professionals body. Or if you are overseas, then you have to certify those documents from the authority authorized to do so in your country. For example, notary in some countries. And always submit those certified documents when submitting the application. Next step, step 4, when everything is ready, your occupation is ready, your ANSCO code, your documents, everything is aligned, then next step is lodge your assessment application. So you can go to the portal of assessing authority and can lodge online and submit the documents, pay the agreed fee, whatever the assessing authority fee is, and then receive the acknowledgement letter from the authority. Normally, after receiving the application, most of the authority takes about 8 weeks to 12 weeks, the processing time. It depends upon the complexity and depending upon the authority. So how long they're going to take. Fifth step, the outcome. So when you did everything and you got the outcome of your skill assessment application, if your outcome is positive, only then you are eligible to apply a particular visa or expression of interest if you're going for the skill visas after getting the assessment outcome. But if it is negative, then what to do? Then the steps are either you can appeal for the decision if you think that decision is not as per your expectation, that you deserve, that you fulfilling all the requirements, then you can go for the appeal for the decision. So assessing authority charge for it to again assess the application. Otherwise, you can resubmit the application with additional supporting documents. Otherwise, the third step is you can reassess under the alternative title, but it must be relevant and closely related. For example, I can give you example of Australian Computer Society. Lot of ICT occupation like software developer, software engineer, programmer developer. They their job responsibility matched a lot. So that's why if one assessment is not going to be positive, go and assess your job responsibility and apply to the nearest match, whatever ANSCO code is matching with your job responsibility, and you can reapply again. But of course, you have to pay again for that new application. So timeline, so all assessing authority have their own timeline, depends upon the complexity of the case. If you're going to assess only qualification in some skill assessment, then it takes lesser time. But if you're going to assess your employment as well, then it may take more time to assess and get the result of that outcome. And each assessing authority have their own different fee, depends upon the authority to authority. So these are the main steps I discussed. What is the skill assessment, why it is required, why it is mandatory, what are the key steps to go for the skill assessment. So overall recap of all these criteria is at the end, I can say that skill assessment is the first and mandatory steps in the skill migration program. Each assessing authority has their unique requirements. As I described, the various assessing authorities like ACS, NMAC, CPA, IML, TRA, VETASS, and many more. So correct ANSCO code selection is very critical. Strong detailed documents is very critical. The refusal may delay your entire migration timeline process, and processing time, it depends upon 2 to 3 months, depends upon authority to authority. Now, the most common mistake people makes when going for the skill assessment, the first critical mistake is they choose the wrong ANSCO code. So it is very important, depends upon your occupation, and to go for a particular skill assessing authority. So you have to match your skill assessment relevant to your job responsibilities, because different assessing authority, different occupation have the different assessing authority. For example, you have done accounting and you're going for external or internal auditor. So if you choose external auditor instead of internal auditor, depends upon your job responsibilities. So both of these occupations have the different authorities to assess your application. The external auditor assessed by the CPA, IPA, whereas the internal auditors, they assessed by the VET-SS. So your application has to be with the right assessing authority to assess. And submitting fake or generic employment experience generally got the negative outcome. And third important test is the missing of English test deadline. So English test for skill assessment purpose is valid for 3 years. So your test must be valid when you apply for the skill assessment, and test result must match the requirement of the assessing authorities. For example, Engineer Australia, they said you must have competent English, so which is IELTS 6 or equivalent each in all module. So you have to match this criteria before lodging the assessment application, otherwise it would be invalid. They will not assess without the English test. Another thing, the ignoring the strict template. So each assessing authority has a specific requirements to match with your work references, especially. For example, ACS, VET-SS, this says that your work reference letter must contain the email address, contact address, address of the company, everything, and a reference letter must be on the company letterhead with the detail job responsibilities, and it must have exact start and end date, how much salary you was taking, whether your job was full-time, part-time, how the job. So everything must be mentioned on the work reference letter. And the third thing, critically, you have to choose the correct assessment pathway. As I said, different assessing authority have their different pathway to assess the application. For example, if you're going to assess your application on the basis of qualification, then they may have different pathway. Otherwise, if you're going to have the skill assessment on the basis of RPL or only on the basis of work experience, then they have the different pathway. For example, TRA, if you're going to going after 1 year of work experience or after qualification, so and doing the job ready program, so they assess accordingly under job ready program. But if you have experience like more than 3 years, then they have a different pathway to apply for, which is called General Migration Skill Assessment Pathway, MSA. So similarly in other authorities as well, similarly with the ACS as well. So they have different pathway for RPL clients and for relevant qualification clients, a different pathway. If you don't have qualification major in your specific occupation, then they have different pathway, depends upon your work experience. So you have to be very careful about that. So that's why I'm telling you, always seek migration agent advice whenever you're going to lodge your skill assessment application. So now I discussed most of the relevant criteria related to the skill assessment, why it is mandatory, what are the requirements, everything you must understand now. So still, if you have any question, you're going to lodge your skill assessment application, or you seek advice or seek assistance to choose the correct occupation code and JESCO code, and you have to need to match your job responsibility with the particular occupation. So we are here to help you. So our contact numbers are there. You can directly contact us on our nearest CCA office. Our office located on most of the states in Australia and in overseas as well. So you can Google it, your nearest CCA office, or you can contact us directly on our number given on the screen. So thank you so much for today. So please do contact us if you need any assistance for migration program. Thank you for today.